Welcome, dear listener, to another magical journey in Willowbrook Adventure Book 2. As the sun sets and the stars begin to twinkle above, we invite you to close your eyes, settle in, and let the adventure unfold. Tonight, we venture deeper into the heart of Willowbrook, where ancient secrets lie hidden and the forest whispers its tales. In this enchanted place, a dark mystery stirs, one that will test the courage of our friends. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let your imagination soar as we step into the world of Willowbrook, where every shadow holds a story and every path leads to wonder. Written by Mr. A.D., voiced by John Deo A.I. Chapter 1. A New Dawn in Willowbrook. The village of Willowbrook stirred to life with the first golden rays of sunlight piercing through the dense canopy of the Enchanted Forest. Birds greeted the morning with their melodious songs, while the distant rustling of leaves signaled the awakening of creatures hidden within the depths of the ancient woods. In the heart of the village, Ivy sat by her weaving loom, her deft fingers threading patterns that seemed to echo the whispers of the forest. Her son, Rowan, watched intently, sketching the intricate designs in his notebook, dreaming of the stories they held. Nearby, Oswin, the wandering bard, strummed his lute, humming a tune that carried hints of forgotten legends. His daughter, Lyric, twirled around him, adding her voice to the melody, her song light yet haunting. At the village apothecary, Wren carefully sorted through bundles of dried herbs, her sharp hazel eyes scanning each leaf with precision. Juniper, her quiet daughter, dutifully assisted, her small hands arranging the herbs with the same care her mother exhibited. Dorian, the village carpenter, ran his hands over the smooth wood of a newly carved chair. His son, Alder, stood beside him, eagerly trying to carve his own small animal figure, the shavings curling onto the floor like fallen leaves. Fern, the village beekeeper, moved among her hives with practiced ease, speaking in soft tones to her beloved bees. Penny and Petal, her lively twin daughters, danced around the hives, their laughter harmonizing with the gentle hum of the bees. Alaric, the village hunter, adjusted the bow slung over his back as he examined tracks in the soft earth. His son, Orin, crouched beside him, mirroring his father's movements with a quiet determination, learning the art of the hunt with unwavering focus. Eloise, the schoolteacher, gathered her young students in the village square. Her son, Elliot, helped arrange the day's lessons, his nose already buried in a book filled with tales of old magic and forgotten heroes. Bastian, the glassblower, meticulously shaped molten glass, his hands steady as he crafted intricate designs that shimmered in the morning light. His nephew, Cyrus, watched in fascination, dreaming of the day he could create his own masterpieces infused with the magic of the forest. Rhea, the baker, kneaded dough with practiced ease, the scent of freshly baked bread filling the air. Her daughter Maisie giggled as she shaped small pastries, decorating them with patterns inspired by the flowers her mother often used in her recipes. Cassian, the village tinker, worked diligently in his small workshop, adjusting the gears of an old contraption. His son, Felix, hovered nearby, eager to test his latest invention, though past failures had resulted in more than a few accidental explosions. Freya, the potter, carefully shaped a bowl from clay, her fingers tracing the swirling patterns of the Enchanted Forest's hidden rivers. Her daughter, Tess, molded a small fox figurine, inspired by the mysterious Silphara, a spirit known to guide lost travelers back to safety. As the village bustled with its morning routines, the towering presence of Erendor, the stag of the forest, emerged from the mist beyond. His golden antlers glowed faintly, a silent guardian watching over the village, ensuring that the harmony between Willowbrook and the Enchanted Forest remained unbroken. Beyond the village, within the depths of the Enchanted Forest, ancient forces stirred. Meir the owl, keeper of ancient knowledge, perched high upon an ancient oak, her emerald eyes scanning the horizon for signs of imbalance. Kalin the wolf prowled the shadowed paths, ever watchful for Ray's growing influence, while Aurelia the swan glided silently across the mystic waters, sensing the subtle shifts in the forest's magic. Yet, far beyond the watchful eyes of the guardians, at the very edge of the Enchanted Forest, tenebrous rift loomed. The swirling darkness pulsed with an ominous energy, whispering promises of power to those willing to embrace its shadow. Within its depths, Ray's pack gathered, their glowing eyes peering hungrily into the night, waiting for the moment to strike. Unbeknownst to the villagers, shadows loomed at the edge of the forest, where darkened paths led into the depths of tenebrous rift. The air grew still, and a sense of unease flickered through the trees, as if the forest itself held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. The dawn had come, but whether it heralded a day of peace or the beginning of something far more sinister remained unknown. Chapter 2: Life in Willowbrook. As the sun climbed higher, the village of Willowbrook carried on its daily rhythms. The marketplace bustled with activity, filled with the scent of fresh bread, the sound of hammering from the blacksmith's forge, and the hum of quiet conversations. Merchants displayed their goods, from hand-woven fabrics to freshly caught fish, while children ran between stalls, laughing as they played. The village square, a large open space framed by ancient oaks, served as the heart of the community, where people gathered not just to trade, but to share stories, news, and laughter. At the center of the square, Eloise, the school teacher, had gathered a group of children beneath the shade of the great oak tree. She held up an old, weathered book, her auburn curls bouncing as she spoke animatedly about the legends of the Enchanted Forest. Her son, Elliot, sat close by, flipping through his own book, his curious mind always eager for more knowledge. He often asked questions about the ancient guardians, wondering if any still watched over them. Nearby, Rhea stood behind the wooden counter of her bakery, carefully arranging trays of golden brown pastries. The scent of honeyed tarts and cinnamon bread filled the air, drawing villagers to her stall. Her daughter, Maisie, clapped her flour-dusted hands excitedly as she shaped a batch of dough into little flower patterns. "One day, I'll make the best pastries in all of Willowbrook," she proclaimed proudly, making her mother chuckle. Across the square, Bastian, the glassblower, worked meticulously in his forge, the glow of molten glass reflecting in his soot-streaked hands. His nephew, Cyrus, stood beside him, watching intently as he shaped a delicate glass butterfly, the faint shimmer of magic glinting within its wings. "The glass must be shaped with patience and care," Bastian explained, his voice warm but firm. "Like the forest, it cannot be rushed." Further down the village path, Cassian tinkered in his small workshop, adjusting the gears of a tiny contraption. His son, Felix, watched eagerly, hands twitching to assist, though his previous attempts at fixing things often resulted in more trouble than success. The walls of the workshop were lined with half-finished inventions, some of which hummed faintly with life. "One day my machines will help everyone in Willowbrook," Felix declared, undeterred by past failures. Not far away, Clover, the village tailor, worked steadily on her latest creation, stitching an intricate design onto a cloak. Her granddaughter, Lila, sat beside her, threading a needle with surprising patience for her young age. "Every stitch holds a story," Clover murmured, guiding Lila's hand gently. Many of her designs incorporated symbols of the forest leaves, animals, and even faint echoes of the magic that lingered just beyond the village borders. By the river's edge, Fern tended to her bees, murmuring softly as she worked. Penny and Petal, her lively twin daughters, darted between the hives, their laughter blending with the gentle hum of the bees. Their sun-kissed hair gleamed in the morning light as they carefully gathered honeycomb under their mother's watchful eye. "The bees are our family, too," Fern reminded them. "We care for them, and they care for us." The sound of rhythmic hammering echoed from the blacksmith's forge, where Thaddeus, the village blacksmith, worked tirelessly. Sparks flew as he pounded metal into shape, while his apprentice, Ronan, stood nearby, muscles tensed as he tried to mirror his mentor's movements. His younger brother, Rory, peeked in from the doorway, eyes wide with admiration. "One day, I'll forge my own blade," Ronan murmured, determination in his voice. Alaric, the village hunter, sat at the edge of the square, sharpening his arrows with careful precision. His son, Orin, watched with quiet reverence, his own bow resting beside him. Despite his young age, Orin had already begun accompanying his father on short tracking trips, learning the ways of the forest with a deep respect for its balance. "A hunter does not just take," Alaric said. "We give back, ensuring the forest remains strong." Each villager played a crucial role in Willowbrook's delicate harmony. There were storytellers and dreamers, the artisans and protectors. The elders of the village often spoke of the ancient pact between the village and the Enchanted Forest, a bond forged in times long past. The Festival of Harmony, an annual celebration, was only days away, when lanterns would be lit, songs would be sung, and offerings made to honor the guardians of old. Yet even in the warmth of community, there were whispers of unease. Travelers passing through spoke of strange movements at the forest's edge, of shadows darker than the usual twilight, of animals behaving oddly. Though the villagers held their traditions close, some could not shake the feeling that change was coming. For now, Willowbrook thrived in its simple beauty, its people bound together by love, tradition, and an unspoken understanding that their peace, though cherished, was never guaranteed. Chapter 3. Whispers Beyond the Trees. The morning after the village elders' gathering, a hush settled over Willowbrook. The villagers continued their daily routines, yet an air of anticipation lingered. The festival was approaching, and while preparations were well underway, murmurs of concern about the strange happenings at the forest's edge could not be ignored. Ivy sat by her loom, hands threading a delicate pattern into a new tapestry. The shapes forming in the weave troubled her. They were unfamiliar, unbidden, and seemed to depict something stirring beyond the trees. She exchanged glances with Wren, the apothecary, who had stopped by to deliver herbs. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" Ivy asked quietly. Wren hesitated before nodding. "The forest feels restless. I've seen plants wilting in places where they should be thriving." Meanwhile, Alaric and Orin walked toward the outskirts of the village, their bows slung over their shoulders. They intended only to hunt for the festival feast, but a chill hung in the air, unlike anything they had encountered before. Orin, usually so focused on tracking, found himself distracted by the eerie silence. "The birds aren't singing," he whispered. Alaric nodded grimly, scanning the undergrowth for any signs of movement. The Enchanted Forest loomed before them, its towering trees casting elongated shadows that danced in the shifting light. Legends spoke of the ancient guardians who once roamed these lands, creatures of wisdom and power who had long since faded into myth. Yet, as Ivy wove her tapestry and Wren observed the changes in her herbs, a thought lingered in the minds of many villagers. Perhaps the guardians were watching still. Deeper in the village, Cassian the tinker sat at his workbench, fiddling with an intricate clockwork device. His son, Felix, peered over his shoulder. "What's that for?" Felix asked. Cassian sighed. "It's meant to measure disturbances in the wind. Something feels off lately, and I want to know why." At the great hall, the village elders convened. Eloise, the schoolteacher, placed an ancient tome on the long wooden table, its leather-bound pages filled with accounts of strange occurrences from centuries past. "We've seen signs like these before," she said, flipping through the delicate parchment. "Changes in the forest, unnatural stillness, a shift in the balance." Bastian, the glassblower, stood at the edge of the meeting, his arms crossed. "And what do we do about it? If something is awakening in the forest, do we prepare to defend ourselves, or do we seek to understand it?" The question lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken fears. Outside in the market square, the children continued playing, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Yet beneath their innocent joy, the villagers carried the weight of an uncertain future. As twilight descended, Fern's bees returned to their hives in an anxious flurry, their hum lower than usual. Penny and Petal watched them with wide eyes. "They're acting strangely," Penny murmured. "Do you think they're scared?" The scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic tinged the air. The villagers paused in their work, glancing at one another with uncertain expressions. Ivy looked up from her loom, her fingers frozen mid-stitch. "The air is different tonight," she murmured to Wren, who nodded with an unreadable expression. At the village outskirts, Alaric and Oren stood still, their hands tight on their bows. The edge of the forest seemed darker than before, its usual inviting glow replaced by deepening shadows. "We should head back," Oren suggested, unease creeping into his voice. Alaric hesitated before nodding. "We'll warn the others. Something is coming." That night, as the village quieted, Oswin the Bard gathered a small crowd in the town square. He strummed his lute, his voice carrying through the cool air. His song was different this evening, less cheerful, more solemn. He sang of the ancient days when the guardians walked the land, of the battles fought in the forest's heart, and of the silence that followed. The trees remember, the roots still weep, a promise broken, a shadow deep. The stars may shine, the moon may glow, but the forest whispers of what we don't know. The crowd listened, captivated yet unsettled. Even the children, usually restless, sat quietly, absorbing every word. When Oswin finished, he looked toward the forest, his expression unreadable. "Sometimes old songs awaken new truths," he said, packing away his lute. "We should all be listening." In the distance, a lone howl echoed through the trees, a deep, resonant call that sent a shiver down the villagers' spines. It was neither a cry of distress nor of aggression, but something older, something unfamiliar. For the first time in generations, the Enchanted Forest was whispering back. Chapter 4. The Gathering Storm. The morning after Oswin's song, Willowbrook awoke to an unshakable sense of unease. Though the sun rose over the Enchanted Forest as it always did, its light seemed dimmer, its warmth struggling to reach the village. The air carried a weight, something unseen pressing upon the hearts of those who moved through the town square. Ivy resumed her work at the loom, her fingers working methodically, yet her thoughts were scattered. The patterns she wove were not of her own choosing. They came unbidden, shapes of twisting vines and watchful eyes staring back at her from the threads. Wren visited again, her brow furrowed. The herbs I gathered yesterday wilted overnight. I've never seen anything like it before. At the blacksmith's forge, Thaddeus hammered out a new blade, his strikes heavier than usual. Ronan, his apprentice, hesitated before speaking. "Master, do you think it's true, what Oswin sang about? The forest, watching us?" Thaddeus paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "The old songs always have truth in them, lad. We'd do well to remember that." By midday, the village elders had called another meeting, this time in the great hall. The usually calm and measured Eloise spoke first. "Something has changed. We cannot ignore it any longer. Our crops are struggling, the animals grow restless, and the air itself feels heavy." "And what do you propose?" Bastian asked. "That we go into the forest and seek out whatever force stirs there. It could be dangerous." Alaric, standing near the door, nodded. "I've hunted these lands my whole life, and never before have I seen the creatures act this way. Even the wind feels wrong. I say we send a small group to investigate, see if the guardians have truly awakened, or if something else is at play." A murmur rippled through the hall. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked fearful. "If the forest is changing, we need to know why," Eloise said firmly. "We will choose a few among us, those who know the land, those who can interpret the signs. They will venture beyond our borders and return with answers." That night, the chosen few prepared. Alaric, Oren, Ivy, Wren, and Ronan would go. Oswin insisted on joining as well, claiming that the old songs might be the key to understanding what was unfolding. As they gathered supplies, the village watched in silence, their hope and fears resting on the shoulders of those willing to face the unknown. Throughout the evening, villagers approached the group, offering small tokens for protection, charms woven from willow branches, pouches of dried lavender, and stones etched with ancient symbols. "For luck," an elderly woman murmured as she pressed a small wooden carving into Ivy's palm. "The forest remembers kindness." As the night stretched on, Oswin sat by the fire in the town square, softly humming an old melody. Children gathered around, their wide eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Sing us another story," one whispered. Oswin nodded, plucking at his lute, his voice weaving a tale of ancient guardians who once roamed the land, watching over the balance of light and shadow. The dawn was heavy with mist as the group made their way to the forest's edge. The towering trees stood in silence, their canopies blotting out much of the morning light. Even the usual rustling of leaves and distant chirping of birds seemed hushed, as if the forest itself was waiting. Alaric stepped forward first, his experienced eyes scanning the path ahead. "We stay close, no wandering off," he warned. Oren swallowed hard but nodded, his grip tightening on his bow. Wren, carrying a satchel of herbs and remedies, glanced at the trees, her expression unreadable. "Something lingers here," she murmured. They moved cautiously into the trees, their footsteps muffled by the thick undergrowth. Ivy's fingers brushed against the rough bark of an ancient oak, and for a brief moment, she swore she felt it pulse beneath her touch, as if alive with unseen energy. As they ventured deeper, the light grew dimmer, the air thicker. The wind carried distant whispers, too faint to make out yet undeniably there. Ronan shivered but said nothing, his blade drawn and ready. Oswin, walking at the rear, hummed a quiet tune, his voice steady despite the uncertainty pressing upon them. "The forest remembers," he whispered, repeating the words of the old woman from the night before. They continued forward, deeper into the heart of the Enchanted Forest, knowing that whatever secrets lay ahead, there would be no turning back. Chapter 5. The Silent Path. The trees grew denser as the group pressed forward, their towering forms weaving a maze of twisted roots and darkened corridors of foliage. The deeper they walked, the more the air thickened, filled with the scent of damp moss and something else, something older, lingering beneath the surface. Alaric led the way, his sharp gaze flicking from shadow to shadow. Every rustling leaf, every snapped twig beneath their boots sent a ripple of tension through the party. "Eyes open. Listen to the forest," he murmured. Ivy trailed just behind, one hand clutching the wooden charm given to her the night before. The deeper they ventured, the stronger the weight of something unseen pressed against her senses. "It's almost as if the forest is waiting for us," she whispered to Wren. Oswin, who had been silent until now, plucked a quiet note on his lute. "Or watching us," he added softly. Orin, gripping his bow tightly, scanned the trees. "Then let's hope it's watching kindly." The path narrowed as they approached a small clearing where an ancient stone stood, covered in moss and etched with unfamiliar markings. Ronan stepped forward, brushing away some of the overgrowth. "This looks like some sort of waypoint," he said. "Maybe a marker left behind by the Guardians." Wren knelt beside it, running her fingers over the markings. Not just a marker, a warning. Something passed through here recently, something powerful. The wind shifted, carrying a distant sound, a deep resonant howl that sent a shiver down their spines. They exchanged uneasy glances. "We keep moving," Alaric said firmly, his voice low but steady. "We're not alone in these woods." They pressed forward, the shadows lengthening around them, the whispers in the wind growing ever clearer. As they moved deeper into the forest, the towering canopy above blocked out more and more light. The once familiar path seemed to twist unnaturally, leading them in directions that felt both right and wrong. The trees, gnarled and ancient, bore signs of something unnatural. Claw marks gouged deep into the bark, charred roots blackened as though by fire, and vines that pulsed faintly with an eerie glow. Ivy hesitated, reaching out to brush a hand against one of the marked trees. The moment her fingers met the rough surface, a sharp whisper echoed in her mind, too fast to understand, too distant to ignore. She gasped and pulled back. "What is it?" Oswin asked, stepping closer. Ivy shook her head. "I don't know, but I heard something, a voice, or many." Oswin frowned, his fingers hovering over the strings of his lute. "Perhaps the forest really is speaking to us. But is it trying to warn us or lure us deeper?" Ronan gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. "Either way, we need to be careful. There is something watching us. I can feel it." They pressed on, their unease growing. The air seemed heavier, and the whispers that had once been distant now felt closer, circling them like unseen specters. The forest itself seemed alive, shifting subtly as though breathing in their presence. Then, ahead of them, a low glow flickered between the trees. "Light," Orin whispered. "Could it be another village?" Alaric narrowed his eyes. No village lies this deep within the forest. Whatever it is, we approach with caution. They crept forward, each step deliberate, their senses on high alert. As they neared the glow, the flickering light resolved into a ring of standing stones, each etched with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly with golden energy. At the center of the circle, a figure stood, cloaked in flowing robes of deep emerald, their face obscured by a hood. The figure did not move as the group entered the clearing. The air around them shimmered, as if reality itself had been disturbed by their arrival. Then the figure spoke, their voice layered and resonant, as though many voices spoke as one. "You have come far, but the path ahead is darker still. The forest remembers. Do you?" The group exchanged uncertain glances. Ivy stepped forward, clutching the wooden charm given to her by the elder woman in Willowbrook. "Who are you?" she asked cautiously. The figure tilted their head slightly, as though considering the question. "A keeper of what was, what is, and what will be. You stand at the threshold of change. Choose wisely." The glow from the standing stones pulsed in time with the figure's words, and for the first time since entering the forest, Ivy felt as though they had stepped beyond the world they knew. Oswin, his fingers poised over his lute, took a slow breath. "Then tell us, Keeper, what does the forest remember?" The figure raised a hand, and the golden light from the stones flared, illuminating the clearing in brilliance. Shadows danced, and for a brief moment the group saw glimpses, images flickering like reflections on water. A battle long past, the Guardians standing against an unknown force, the land torn and remade. Then the light dimmed, and the forest fell silent once more. "You must decide," the keeper said, their voice heavy with meaning. "Turn back, and the past remains buried. Step forward, and you may unearth more than you seek." Alaric clenched his fists, his mind racing. The others looked to him, to Ivy, to Oswin. The weight of choice lay heavy upon them. The silent path stretched onward, and with it, the fate of all who walked it. The group took a breath and stepped forward. Chapter 6. The Threshold of Shadows. As the group stepped beyond the ring of standing stones, the air grew noticeably colder. The path ahead was not a natural one. It seemed as though the very forest had parted for them, guiding them toward an unseen destination. The ground beneath their feet felt soft, yet firm, as if treading upon ancient soil that had not been disturbed in centuries. Alaric moved cautiously, his grip tightening on the hilt of his blade. "Stay close. This place is watching us." Oswin glanced around, his lute now silent against his back. "I feel it too. There's something waiting." Ivy and Wren exchanged uneasy glances. The whispers that had once seemed distant now curled around them like unseen tendrils, their meanings just out of reach. Oren held his bow ready, his fingers twitching with anticipation. Ahead, the forest thinned into a wide clearing where ruins lay scattered across the ground. Crumbling pillars, half-buried statues, and remnants of what had once been a grand structure lay covered in moss and vines. At the heart of the ruins stood an altar, carved from obsidian-like stone, pulsating with a dim, otherworldly glow. Ronan was the first to break the silence. "This place, it feels like it remembers us." Ivy approached the altar hesitantly, her pulse quickening. Symbols long lost to history covered the stone, their meaning obscured by time. She reached out, brushing her fingers against the surface. The moment she made contact, a shock wave of energy pulsed through the clearing, sending a gust of wind through the trees. The keeper's voice echoed from behind them, though they had not seen them move. "You have stepped beyond the threshold. There is no turning back now. The past is awake." A deep rumbling shook the earth beneath them as shadows stirred between the ruins. From the darkness emerged figures, shapeless at first, then solidifying into beings draped in tattered cloaks. their hollow eyes glowing with unnatural light. "What are they?" Wren whispered, taking a step back. The keeper did not answer, only raising their hand. "They are the echoes of what was lost, the remnants of a time before yours." The shadowed figures did not attack, but stood watching, their presence heavy with sorrow. Oswin swallowed hard, stepping forward. If they are echoes, can they speak? As if in response, one of the figures reached forward, its spectral fingers brushing against Oswin's shoulder. A voice, layered and broken, whispered into his mind. The cycle must not repeat. The forest remembers. Will you? A sudden gust of wind howled through the ruins, and the shadows began to disperse, leaving behind only the silence of the forgotten past. Alaric turned to the others, his voice grim. "We need to move. Whatever this place once was, whatever it's trying to show us, we need to find out why." They pressed deeper into the ruins, their steps cautious. The symbols on the stones flickered as though reacting to their presence, and the air grew thick with unspoken warnings. Ivy ran her fingers over one of the engravings, her breath catching as faint images flashed through her mind. Towers collapsing, rivers running black, the sky darkened by something vast and monstrous. "I think these ruins belonged to the Guardians," she murmured, glancing at Oswin, "or at least to those who came before them." Oswin frowned, strumming a single note on his lute. If that's true, then why were they abandoned? And why do the echoes of the past still linger? Wren knelt beside a broken pillar, brushing away a layer of dirt to reveal a set of inscriptions. This is no ordinary writing. It is a warning. "Beware the harbinger. The rift must remain sealed." A sudden gust of cold air sent a shiver through them, and from beyond the ruins, a sound like shifting stone echoed through the trees. Ronan unsheathed his sword, his stance defensive. "I don't think we're alone anymore." Then from the depths of the ruins, the shadows moved once more. This time, they did not stand idle. The first shape lunged from the darkness, swift as a phantom, its hollow eyes burning with an eerie silver light. Alaric barely had time to react before raising his blade, deflecting the strike. The creature let out a wail, unnatural and piercing, as it twisted unnaturally in the air. Orin fired an arrow, the shaft passing through the entity as though striking mist. Yet the figure recoiled, its form flickering as though disrupted. "They're not invincible," Orin called. "They can be weakened." Oswin strummed his lute, his melody reverberating through the ruins. The very air trembled with his music, and for a moment, the figures hesitated, their forms flickering. "They respond to sound. Keep playing," Wren shouted. They pressed deeper into the ruins, their steps cautious. The symbols on the stones flickered as though reacting to their presence, and the air grew thick with unspoken warnings. Ivy ran her fingers over one of the engravings, her breath catching as faint images flashed through her mind. Towers collapsing, rivers running black, the sky darkened by something vast and monstrous. "I think these ruins belonged to the Guardians," she murmured, glancing at Oswin, "or at least to those who came before them." Oswin frowned, strumming a single note on his lute. If that's true, then why were they abandoned? And why do the echoes of the past still linger? Wren knelt beside a broken pillar, brushing away a layer of dirt to reveal a set of inscriptions. This is no ordinary writing. It is a warning. "Beware the harbinger. The rift must remain sealed." A sudden gust of cold air sent a shiver through them, and from beyond the ruins, a sound like shifting stone echoed through the trees. Ronan unsheathed his sword, his stance defensive. "I don't think we're alone anymore." Then from the depths of the ruins, The shadows moved once more. This time, they did not stand idle. The first shape lunged from the darkness, swift as a phantom, its hollow eyes burning with an eerie silver light. Alaric barely had time to react before raising his blade, deflecting the strike. The creature let out a wail, unnatural and piercing, as it twisted unnaturally in the air. Orin fired an arrow, the shaft passing through the entity as though striking mist. Yet the figure recoiled, its form flickering as though disrupted. "They're not invincible," Orin called. "They can be weakened." Oswin strummed his lute, his melody reverberating through the ruins. The very air trembled with his music, and for a moment, the figures hesitated, their forms flickering. "They respond to sound. Keep playing," Wren shouted. Ivy gripped her charm, whispering an incantation she barely understood. The wooden token pulsed, and the symbols on the altar flared to life, casting beams of light into the clearing. The shadows shrieked as the light struck them, their forms unraveling like smoke caught in a gale. One by one, the creatures faded, their howls dissipating into the night. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. Oswin exhaled, lowering his lute. That was too close. The keeper's voice returned, softer this time. The echoes fade, but the past does not forget. The rift stirs once more. You must decide if you will seal it or open it. Ivy turned to the others, her heart pounding. "We came here for answers, but I think we're about to find something far more dangerous." Alaric sheathed his blade, nodding. "Then we press on. Whatever lies ahead, we face it together." The ruins stood behind them, silent once more. But the path before them was darker than ever. Chapter 7. Guardians of the Rift. The path beyond the ruins led to a narrow valley shrouded in mist, the trees growing denser around them as if nature itself sought to keep intruders out. The air was thick with an eerie silence, the kind that made every step sound unnaturally loud. Ivy's fingers gripped her charm tightly as she felt the growing weight of unseen eyes watching from the darkness. Alaric slowed, holding up a hand to signal the group to halt. "We're not alone." Before they could react, a low growl rumbled through the trees, followed by the sound of shifting paws against the damp earth. Emerging from the shadows were the wolves, Ray's pack, 8 in total, their eyes glowing with the unnatural energy of the rift. At the center stood Nyx, Ray's second in command, her black fur bristling as she bared her fangs. "Turn back," she snarled. "You have no right to cross into the rift." Oswin took a cautious step forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "We seek only knowledge. We mean no harm." Nyx's lip curled. "Harm follows those who pry where they don't belong. The portal is sealed for a reason. Ray is already inside. He will not be disturbed." Wren exchanged glances with Ivy, her voice barely above a whisper. "If Ray is inside, that means the portal is open." Alaric drew his sword. "Then we have to go through." A tense silence stretched between them, the wolves bracing for a fight. Then, without warning, Nyx leapt forward, and the clearing erupted into chaos. Swords clashed against claws, arrows flew through the air, and the sounds of battle filled the valley. Orin loosed an arrow at Zorin, the pack's tracker, forcing him back as he tried to flank their group. Ronan met Thorn head-on, the massive wolf snarling as he drove him back with heavy swings of his blade. Ivy and Wren held the rear, weaving protective charms while Oswin's lute rang out, its melody cutting through the fray like a beacon of resistance. Seraphina, the mystic of the pack, stood atop a rocky outcrop, her violet eyes gleaming as she chanted in a low, guttural tone. The air around her shimmered, dark tendrils of energy coiling toward the battlefield. "You will not pass," she hissed, her magic striking the ground like a wave of corruption. Ivy barely managed to counter it. With a burst of her own power, the two forces colliding in a blinding flash. Meanwhile, Gareth, the elder of the pack, circled the battlefield, barking out orders. "Hold the line. Do not let them reach the portal." His voice carried authority, and for a moment, the tide of battle shifted as the wolves pushed the villagers back. But Alaric was relentless. He cut through the fray, dodging Varek's swift attacks before landing a powerful strike that sent the strategist wolf reeling. "We don't have time for this," he shouted, signaling to Oswin and Ivy. As the battle raged, a few among them saw their chance. Alaric, Oswin, and Ivy broke from the fight, sprinting toward the portal, a swirling mass of dark energy hovering just beyond the battlefield. The wolves lunged to stop them, but Orin's well-placed shots and Wren's barriers slowed their pursuit just long enough for the three to reach the threshold. Nyx's furious snarl rang out. "No!" Thorn made a final desperate leap at Oswin, claws outstretched, but Oswin twisted at the last moment, slamming the hilt of his dagger into the wolf's skull. Thorn staggered, shortly dazed, just long enough for Oswin to dive into the portal. The moment Alaric and Ivy touched the edge of the portal, a powerful force pulled them through, their figures vanishing into the dark realm beyond. Oswin hesitated for only a breath before diving in after them. The last thing they heard before the portal sealed behind them was the echo of Nyx's howl, a cry of frustration or perhaps a warning of what lay ahead. Back in the clearing, the remaining villagers regrouped, their breaths coming hard and fast. Ronan wiped blood from his blade, glaring at the wolves. "This isn't over." Nyx's golden eyes burned as she growled low. "Number, it's only just begun." Chapter 8. The Shadowmere Gate. Darkness enveloped them as Alaric, Ivy, and Oswin were pulled through the portal. The sensation was unlike anything they had ever felt before, weightless yet crushing, a void that pressed against their very essence. Time seemed to stretch and compress, their thoughts flickering between past and present in an instant. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. They landed hard on uneven ground, gasping for breath. Around them, an eerie landscape unfolded. The sky above was a swirling abyss of deep indigo, streaked with faint traces of violet lightning that illuminated jagged cliffs in the distance. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, like ancient stone, worn smooth by time. Before them loomed Shadowmere Gate, a colossal archway of obsidian and silver, pulsing with the same dark energy as the portal they had just passed through. The ruins of an ancient stronghold stretched beyond it, half buried in mist that slithered along the cracked stone floor. The towering remnants of walls bore intricate carvings, symbols that flickered between recognition and obscurity, as if the very nature of the place resisted being understood. Oswin pushed himself to his feet, his voice hushed. "This place, it feels wrong." Ivy's eyes scanned their surroundings. "It feels empty, like something is missing." Alaric's grip tightened on his sword. "Ray is here, and whatever he's looking for, we can't let him find it." A sudden sound cut through the silence, a distant growl, deep and reverberating. It echoed through the ruins, making the mist ripple as though disturbed by an unseen force. The three exchanged wary glances before stepping forward toward the gate, toward whatever lay beyond. The deeper they walked into the ruins, the more unsettling the atmosphere became. Shadows shifted unnaturally, stretching and contracting as if they had a life of their own. Faint whispers curled through the air, voices too distorted to be fully understood, but filled with urgency. "This place isn't abandoned," Ivy murmured. "It's waiting." Beyond the archway, they found themselves on a narrow stone bridge, suspended over what looked like an endless abyss. Below them, darkness churned like liquid shadow, moving as though something ancient and hungry slumbered beneath. The bridge itself was cracked and unstable, but there was no other path forward. "Keep moving," Alaric urged, stepping cautiously. They barely made it halfway across when a new sound filled the air, a sharp, predatory snarl. From the darkness ahead, figures emerged, their eyes gleaming like molten silver. Ray's vanguard, a massive wolf, larger than any they had faced before, stepped onto the bridge, his midnight black fur streaked with jagged silver markings. Nyx's brother, Varek. "You should not have come," he rumbled, his voice thick with menace. "This is not your realm." Alaric raised his blade. "We go where we must." Varek's lips curled back in a growl. "Then you'll die here." Before they could react, more wolves surged onto the bridge. Zoran and Thorn led the charge, their forms blurring with unnatural speed. Ivy barely had time to raise her charm before Varek lunged, his massive claws tearing through the air toward her. Oswin ducked under a sweeping strike from Zorin, rolling onto his feet and drawing a dagger in one smooth motion. "I guess we're doing this the hard way." The battle erupted in chaos. Alaric parried blow after blow from Thorn, his sword barely holding back the brute strength of the massive wolf. Ivy wove protective spells as fast as she could, her energy already draining from the sheer oppressive weight of the Shadowmere realm. Then above them, the air itself seemed to crack open. A towering figure stepped out from the void, his form draped in shifting darkness. Ray. His silver eyes glowed with eerie brilliance as he observed the battle with cold amusement. "You're persistent," he mused, his voice laced with cruel satisfaction. "But you don't belong here." Alaric turned to face him, his chest rising and falling heavily. "We could say the same about you." Ray's expression darkened. "This realm belongs to those strong enough to claim it, and I am claiming it." Ivy's pulse pounded in her ears. They had come too far to fail now. Whatever secrets Shadowmere held, Ray was closer than ever to unlocking them, and if he did, the realm itself might never recover. With renewed determination, she braced herself, summoning every ounce of her strength. The fight for Shadowmere Gate had truly begun. Chapter 9. The Whispering Veil. A stillness settled over Shadowmere Gate as the battle raged. Yet beyond the ruins and the bridge, something darker stirred. The air thickened, carrying a bone-deep chill that gnawed at the senses. Shadows slithered where there were no figures, whispering in a language beyond mortal understanding. The mist had awakened. It seeped in from the abyss, curling along the ground like living tendrils. A presence not merely fog or vapor, but something sentient, watching and waiting. It had no form, yet it moved with eerie intent. No footsteps, no breath, yet its presence filled the space between worlds. It was known in hushed legends as the Whispering Veil, a realm unto itself. The veil had slumbered for ages, bound within the depths of Shadowmere, unable to breach the borders between worlds. Not because it lacked strength, but because it lacked a host. Oswin turned sharply as the cold pressed against his back. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Ivy's fingers tightened around her charm. "Not hear? Feel?" The mist coiled around them, curling like fingers dragging across their skin. Not just cold, but searching, testing. It slithered between the ruined stones, creeping up to where Ray stood upon the bridge. The dark wolf turned his head, his silver eyes narrowing. "It knows," Ray murmured. "It's been waiting." A deep, guttural sound reverberated through the ruins, a voice without a body, words formed from air and silence itself. "Intruders, thieves, you walk in my prison, and yet you breathe." Alaric braced himself, his sword trembling in his grasp. "What is that?" The mist thickened, drawing itself upward into the vague shape of something ancient, something unnatural. Its form flickered, like a shadow cast against unseen walls, ever changing, never settling. "You call this Shadowmere. You are wrong. This is mine." A pulse of dread surged through the air, and the wolves who had once been so fierce faltered. Even Nyx, standing far beyond the portal's threshold, took a step back. This was no mere magic. This was something before magic. Ray's gaze hardened. "You are bound here. You cannot pass through the realms, not without a vessel." The mist swirled, tightening around the bridge. "And so I shall take one." A rush of cold struck Oswin like a wave, knocking him to his knees. He gasped as the mist clawed at his mind, voices filling his head, whispers so many that they became one. He felt himself slipping, something vast pressing against his thoughts, searching, weighing his soul. Ivy threw herself forward, grasping his shoulders. "Oswin, stay with me." He shuddered, blinking rapidly, forcing the sensation away as Ivy's magic pulsed between them, breaking the mist's hold. The whispering veil recoiled with a sharp hiss, its shape writhing violently. It had found him unfit, but it would not stop searching. Alaric lunged forward, his blade slashing through the mist, only for it to reform instantly. It laughed a sound like wind through hollow bones. "Fool, I do not bleed, but you will." The mist surged forward, striking outward like a living storm, tendrils lashing at everything in its path. The bridge cracked under its fury, stones splitting and tumbling into the abyss below. The battle had changed. It was no longer just against Ray and his pack. Now, they had another enemy, one that could not be killed. Ivy gritted her teeth. They had to move. They had to escape. But even as she turned, she knew the whispering veil would not let them go so easily. For the first time in centuries, it had stirred from its prison, and it would not be trapped again. Chapter 10. The Hollow Awakening. Ray stood on the crumbling bridge, his gaze fixed on the swirling mist as it recoiled from its failed attempt to take Oswin. His silver eyes narrowed, something unreadable flickering within them. The mist pulsed, rippling with frustration, and then stilled. "You are strong," it whispered to Ray, tendrils curling toward him like fingers beckoning. "Your will is vast. You are worthy." The dark-furred wolf took a step back, his claws scraping against the stone. "I am no one's pawn." The whispering veil trembled, and then surged forward without warning. A rush of freezing air enveloped Ray, and before anyone could react, the mist slammed into him, wrapping around his body in an unrelenting embrace. "Ray." Nyx's voice rang out, horror breaking through her usual cold demeanor as she watched the mist coil into her leader. Ray gasped, his entire form locking in place, his limbs convulsed as the veil forced itself into him, burrowing deeper, consuming. His silver eyes flashed, then darkened, shifting into something unnatural, something abyssal. His body stilled. Then ever so slowly, he lifted his head. When he spoke, it was no longer just his voice. It was layered, a harmony of whispers beneath his words. "I am free." The remaining wolves hesitated, their once unwavering loyalty shaken. Nyx took a single step forward, her voice tight. "Ray." But the creature that turned to look at her was no longer Ray. With unnatural grace, the possessed wolf turned away from the bridge, toward the ruined gate. The portal leading back to their realm flickered weakly, its energy unstable from the battle. The Whispering Vale had found its vessel, and now it had the means to escape. Before anyone could stop him, Ray stepped into the portal. A pulse of dark energy surged outward, blinding those left behind. The moment they regained their vision, he was gone. The mist had vanished. The battle had ended. But none knew what had become of the Whispering Vale. Only silence remained in Shadowmere, thick and suffocating. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Abyss. The silence that followed Ray's disappearance was deafening. The warriors who had moments ago fought with desperate fury now stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the dark wolf had stood. The portal flickered weakly, its energy drained, as if Shadowmere itself had recoiled from what had just transpired. Nyx's breath came in ragged gasps. Her golden eyes darted between the fractured stones and the dissipating remnants of the mist. He's gone, but that wasn't him anymore. Ren clutched at the nearest rock for balance. The mist took him. Alaric wiped the sweat from his brow, his grip still tight on his sword. We have to find out where it went. If the Whispering Vale now wears Ray's body, we might be dealing with something far worse than we ever imagined. Oswin turned toward the ruins, his voice hesitant. Did anyone else notice? The mist didn't just take Ray, it wanted him. It sought him out. That means this wasn't random. The weight of his words settled on them all. The Whispering Vale had waited, watched, and chosen Ray for a reason. But why? The ground beneath them trembled slightly. A warning. The presence of the mist had stirred something ancient within the realm. Ivy placed her hand against one of the standing stones, her mind flooding with fragmented visions, darkness stretching through the lands, figures lost to time, and a single, suffocating force seeking dominion over all. "This isn't over," she whispered. The bridge groaned beneath them, its already weakened structure threatening to collapse. "We need to leave before Shadowmere decides to bury us here," Alaric ordered. The remaining wolves of Ray's pack stood uncertain, their leader gone, their purpose shattered. Nyx turned toward them, her voice cutting through the tension. "We regroup. We decide what comes next. But this fight isn't over." She locked eyes with Alaric. "You'll want to find him. So will we. I don't trust you, but right now, we have the same enemy." Alaric hesitated before nodding. "Then let's get out of here while we still can." One by one, they stepped back through the failing portal. A rush of energy washed over them as the cold of Shadowmere faded, replaced by the humid air of their own realm. As the last of them crossed, the portal flickered once more, then shattered, its remnants dispersing into the wind. A strange hush settled over the land. Though they had returned, the battle was far from won. The Whispering Vale had crossed the threshold, and Ray was no more. Yet somewhere, hidden in the dark corners of the world, something watched, and it was waiting for them to make their next move. Chapter 12. A somber return. The journey back to Willowbrook was a quiet one, the weight of loss pressing against the weary travelers. The air, once filled with the tension of battle, now carried only an uneasy stillness. Every step forward felt heavier, burdened by the knowledge that they had left behind more than just ruins in Shadowmere. They had lost Ray, and in his place, something far more dangerous had been unleashed. Ivy walked alongside Oswin, her eyes distant. "Do you think he's still in there? Ray, I mean. Do you think he's fighting it?" Oswin hesitated, his fingers tracing the edges of his lute. I don't know. But if he is, he's trapped in something far beyond our understanding. Nyx, walking ahead with the remnants of Ray's pack, remained silent. The once proud and unyielding wolves now moved with uncertainty, their purpose shaken. Without Ray, they had no leader. Without their leader, they had no direction. Alaric kept his gaze forward, his grip firm on his sword. We need to warn the others. If the Whispering Veil has taken form in our world, it won't stay quiet for long. Ronan nodded, his voice grim. And what about them? He gestured toward the wolves. What do we do with them? Nyx's ears twitched, her golden eyes flicking toward them. We fight the same enemy now. We will not run. The alliance was uneasy, built from necessity rather than trust. But for now, they had little choice. As they reached the outskirts of Willowbrook, the village came into view, its familiar lights flickering in the evening air. The sight should have been comforting, a beacon of home after hardship. But to Alaric and the others, it only served as a reminder that they were returning with more questions than answers. Children played near the village square, oblivious to the battle that had unfolded beyond their borders. The elders gathered outside their homes, murmuring among themselves as the weary group approached. Their return had been expected, but not like this. Eloise, the village teacher, stepped forward, her sharp gaze assessing the newcomers. You return, but something lingers in your shadows. Ivy swallowed hard. The battle isn't over. It's only just begun. Nyx and her wolves stood at the edge of the village, unsure whether they were welcome. But no one turned them away. For now, Willowbrook would have to shelter not only its own, but those who had once been its enemies. As night fell, the first whispers of the wind carried something unseen, something waiting beyond the edges of the world. The Whispering Veil had taken its first step into the realm. Soon, it would take another. Chapter 13. The Guardians Return. The night sky stretched endlessly over Willowbrook, its dark canvas dotted with countless stars. A cold wind whispered through the trees, carrying the echoes of what had been lost. The battle was over, but its scars remained fresh, and an uneasy quiet had settled over the village. Alaric stood near the village gates, his sword sheathed, but his stance rigid. Every shadow felt longer, every gust of wind carried the weight of the unknown. The Whispering Veil was out there, somewhere, lurking in the darkness of the world, waiting for its moment. The others had dispersed, some to rest, some to grieve, and some to watch over their unexpected guests. Nyx and her wolves kept their distance from the villagers, their loyalty fractured, their future uncertain. They were no longer Ray's pack. They were something else now. Then, as the dawn threatened to break over the horizon, the call came. A low, resonant sound rippled through the air, neither human nor animal. It was ancient, powerful, a sound not heard in generations. The Guardians had returned. From the depths of the Enchanted Forest, towering figures emerged, their presence commanding yet serene. Erendor the stag, his golden antlers shimmering faintly in the morning light, stepped forward first, his wise gaze sweeping over the battle-weary travelers. Kalin the wolf followed, his silver eyes filled with a knowing sadness. Meir the owl, perched atop the remnants of a broken stone wall, observed in silence, her emerald eyes gleaming. Tholos the bear, Aurelia the swan, and Fenric the badger moved into view, each carrying the weight of a long-forgotten duty. The villagers gasped, some dropping to their knees in reverence. The Guardians were more than legends. They were the balance between worlds, the protectors of what should not be disturbed. Erendor's voice rumbled like distant thunder. The veil has been broken, the balance disturbed. We have returned because we must. Ivy stepped forward, her voice steady, despite the fear coiling in her chest. We need your help. Something ancient has escaped, and it's using Ray as its vessel. Kalen's ears flicked back. We know. We have felt its hunger in the wind. Nyx finally spoke, stepping beside Ivy. Then help us stop it. Whatever Ray has become, we need to bring him back, or end this before it's too late. Tholos let out a low growl. You do not understand. The Whispering Veil is not merely a presence. It is a force of consumption, an echo of something far older than even we. To fight it is to battle against the fabric of the realms themselves. Alaric's hands clenched into fists. So what do we do? Let it roam free? Let it take more lives? Erendor stepped forward, his voice carrying finality. Number, we do not let it roam free. We prepare. The Whispering Veil has broken free of its prison, but it is not yet whole. It will seek to regain its power, and that means we have time. Oswin nodded, his voice grim. Time to find out where it's going, and how to stop it. The Guardians stood together, their forms blending into the misty morning light. They had returned not to fight, but to guide. The war that was coming was not one of swords and claws alone. It was something deeper, something written in the bones of the world itself. Ivy met Erendor's gaze. So where do we begin? A heavy silence followed, and then Kalen spoke. We begin with what was lost. The past holds the answers we seek. As the first rays of sunlight touched the village, a new journey had begun. One that would carry them beyond Willowbrook, beyond the Enchanted Forest, into the unknown. Though the darkness loomed, though the path ahead was treacherous, one thing remained clear. The fight was not over. It had only just begun. To be continued in the next book.